Talk of civil war used to be the stuff of history class or maybe speculative fiction, but today, scholars of history and political science now openly discuss the possibility of a new American Civil War. My next guest, Professor Barbara F. Walter, is an expert on civil wars around the world. She has spent years advising the CIA on the subject. In her work examining the seeds of civil war in distant lands, she started noticing some of those warning signs close to home right here in America, long before most others did. She's been sounding the alarm about the threat since at least 2008, and her message today is that we should not ignore those warning signs. She writes that Donald Trump embraced identity politics explicitly and with gusto. To quote her, she says, "No Republican president in the past 50 years has ever pursued such an openly racist platform or championed white evangelical Americans at the expense of everyone else." That's a quote from Barbara Walter. For a long time, Walter found it difficult to get people to take her warning seriously until January 6, 2021. That is when Americans started paying closer attention. On that day, Trump told his supporters to fight like hell, and they would follow through with armed, sharpened flagpoles and stun guns. Most were white, most were men, Walters writes. January 6th was the grim outcome of one of the most divisive elections in U.S. history, and yet somehow it feels as though an even bigger powder keg has been building ever since. Crucially, Walter urges us to rethink our assumptions about civil war, not just its possibility, but also what such a war might look like. This is disturbing stuff. She warns us that civil wars are not typically started by the groups most people expect, the poorest or the most marginalized. Instead, they are often ignited by groups that were once politically dominant but are now in decline. Today, the U.S. is undergoing major demographic shifts, transitioning from a majority white Christian nation to a majority non-white population that's expected to happen by 2045. This shift means that those who no longer hold a majority of the vote could lose political power. According to Walter, a new American Civil War would likely be a war of insurgency fought by militias using guerrilla tactics, including terrorism. Those groups would avoid engaging directly with the military, instead targeting civilians, black churches, synagogues, federal judges they deem hostile. America, she warns, cannot afford to keep putting off this possibility. A subset of the country's population has long enjoyed privileges and power, and they're not going to let go without a fight. Some of them are not going to let go without a fight, she says. In her book, How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them, Walter writes, quote, "No one wants to believe that their beloved democracy is in decline or headed toward war. The decay is often so incremental that people often fail to notice or understand it, even as they are experiencing it. If you were an analyst in a foreign country looking at events in America the same way you'd look at events in Ukraine or the Ivory Coast or Venezuela, you would go down a checklist assessing each of the conditions that make civil war likely. And what you would find is that the United States, a democracy founded more than 2 centuries ago, has entered very dangerous territory. The United States is an anocracy for the first time in more than 200 years. Let that sink in. We are no longer the world's oldest continuous democracy. The question for America moving forward is whether voters can be persuaded that their democracy works and is critical to their safety, and whether leaders will choose to reinstate its guardrails."
All right, Shalom. This is the brother Nahal, your friend at GMS Orlando camp. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rokah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who will believe in this word, and all truth and sincerity. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 15. I'm going to jump down to verse 14. And it reads, "Woe to the world and them that dwell therein, for the sword and their destruction draweth nigh. And one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands. For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power." All right, and I want to go into a lesson based on the clip you just saw of a woman that was being interviewed concerning civil war, all right, concerning sedition, all right, and the data that she's seen around the world prior to any kind of civil conflict, all right, is starting to match up with the things that are going on here in Babylon the Great, which is America. And we know through the spirit that it all goes back to prophecy. You know, when you think about the whole Trump campaign, you know, Trump basically sold his people, all right, the average so-called white person, on the idea that the commonwealth, or that common so-called white privilege, would be restored. All right, that's why Make America Great Again was a dog whistle for the average so-called white person, in convincing them that getting Trump in office would allow them to receive that privilege that they once had. All right. We know through the spirit that in actuality what's happening is Trump is going to get in. All right. And he's going to continue to allow the elites and the rich to continue to get richer while boxing out the average so-called white person. All right. This is Revelation chapter 13. And I'm going to jump down to, I'll just get the point. In verse 11, Revelation 13 and 11, and it reads, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." All right, because when you look at the two-party system, all right, what is it? It's the Democrats and the Republicans. And really that goes back to the beast whose deadly wound was healed. All right, because when you deal with the Roman Empire, all right, you had basically a two-party system. All right, you had the patricians and you had the plebeians. All right, plebs for short, which is basically the common Roman. All right, during that time, and the patricians were the elites. All right, and in modern day, you have the Republicans and the Democrats, where the Democrats pretend, or they put on this facade that they're here for the common man or common citizen of America. All right, and then the Republicans are the conservative party. All right, which is the modern day patricians. All right, now Trump at one point was a Democrat, and then he jumped over to being Republican. And his whole slogan of making America great again, all right, was to convince the average Edomite, all right, that they'll win again. All right, that this kingdom will be rebuilt. All right, that's why he said make America great again. And that's the mentality of an Edomite. All right, this is Malachi 1 and 4. "Whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever." So Esau's mentality has always been, no matter how low he gets, he's going to return and build the desolate places. And this is why the message that Trump presented to get in office is so attractive to the average Edomite, because they believe that their kingdom can be restored. But Trump and his cohorts, all right, are really just selling their own people down the river. All right, now we're entering a realm of classism where Esau is just basically boxing out the rest of his people, all right, through the monetary system, through money, the rich and the poor. He doesn't care about the average Edomite. At a certain point, when you deal with Jim Crow, when you deal with chattel slavery, the average Edomite had the bragging rights of saying, I'm not a Negro, Latino, or Native American. I can go in places where Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans cannot go. And even though they were poor compared to the rich Edomites, or the rich so-called white people, they didn't mind it as much because they still had privilege above Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. That privilege has been destroyed. All right. And it's been destroyed by his own people. All right. So when he figures this out, through the spirit, he's going to rebel against his princes. All right. Because sedition is a violent attempt to overthrow your government. All right. Now, this is Matthew 12 and 25. And he reads, "And Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand?" All right. And you think about, these Edomites are divided on many fronts, from the Russian Edomite to the American Edomite, from the EU Edomites to the American Edomites. Within America, you have the Republican Edomites and the Democratic Edomites. You have the Canadian Edomites who are against the American Edomites. And you see this snowball effect. All right. And really, that's the Lord throwing the curses on our enemies. Because as a nation of people, Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, we're divided. But as we get closer to that day of doom and that judgment, all right, those curses are going to be seen on our enemies, and we're witnessing it. All right. So when the average Edomite figures out that they've been sold down the river and there is no comeback for them, they're going to react, man. All right. This is Isaiah 19:1. The burden of Egypt. Behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And this is exactly what's happening through the Spirit. You know, the Lord is setting up these Edomites to be against each other. You know, even within the Republican Party, there is a divide. You have those that were with Trump until he started to bring Elon Musk in, until he started to bring the Silicon Valley guys in. And the reason he's doing that is because he needs to set up that infrastructure for the beast, for the MOTB. All right. That digital all. And Elon Musk and the Silicon Valley mafia, if you will, are instrumental, all right, in laying down the infrastructure for the MOTB. And you have some Republicans that are with it, and you have some Republicans that are not. And we know eventually through the Spirit, the Lord is going to allow this place to be destroyed. All right. And before that happens, you're going to have civil unrest. Even now, you can really say there's a level of civil unrest already. It just hasn't boiled over. All right. January 6th was a window into it. All right. But it's going to continue. It's going to continue to get worse and worse. All right. It's Isaiah 19:3. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof. And they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the spirit of Egypt is failing. All right. This is why the message of Make America Great Again was so attractive, because you have to acknowledge that the spirit of Egypt, which is America as it's termed today, all right, the spirit here has failed. There's no mirth in this place like it used to be, man. All right. And that's because the Lord is descending this place into confusion. All right. This is Isaiah 47:1. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Uncover thy locks and make bare the leg. Uncover the thigh, pass over the rivers. Thy nakedness shall be uncovered. Yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man. All right. And the Lord is descending this place into madness and confusion. And this is why knowledge shall be the stability of our times, because we understand, according to prophecy, what's next on the agenda. You know, when we look at the news clips, it gives us an understanding of the signs of the times and how close we are to these major events. All right. Isaiah 47:7, and it reads, And thou saidest, I shall be a lady forever, so that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst remember the latter end of it. And it's beautiful, right? Because everything that happened to our people on this side, all right, now the Lord is requiring that which was past. It is beautiful that it's starting with the average regular Edomite who's being sold out by his own people. Because when Jake was being lynched, it was by the average so-called white people. It wasn't the elites that were coming off of their house, coming down off that high horse to go put Jake on a tree. It was the average Edomites who were frustrated with their life during Reconstruction. All right. When slavery was allegedly abolished. All right. It was regular Edomites who were frustrated with their life, and they were taking it out on Jake. Now, really, that was the anger of the Lord, because we sinned against Yahweh Shema Shai. But again, the Lord is not going to allow them to not drink of that cup. And it's starting with the average Edomite. Their life is becoming more and more difficult, and they're watching the slave class of their society rise up above them. You know, it's a lot of Jakes that are in better positions than these average Edomites. And that burns these Edomites, man. That's why they're eventually going to go mask off. You know, they're not going to sit on the sidelines forever. And a lot of that civil unrest, they're going to use that as an excuse to come down on Jake, man. All right, but the Wadi How by Shemal Shai. All right, this is Baruch chapter 4. And I'm going to jump down to verse 30. All right, and it reads, "Take a good heart, O Jerusalem, for he that gave thee that name will comfort thee. Miserable are they that afflicted thee, and rejoiced at thy fall. Miserable are the cities which thy children served. Miserable is she that received thy sons. For as she rejoiced at thy ruin, and was glad of thy fall, so shall she be grieved for her own desolation. For I will take away the rejoicing of her great multitude, and her pride shall be turned into mourning." And this is why Trump telling people we're going to make America great again was so exciting to these Edomites, because they've recognized that the spirit has failed here, man. They're through. And it's because miserable are these cities where we had to come here and serve, where Jake had to get put up on an auction block, where Jake was denied and kicked in the ass when they tried to go get a meal from one of these establishments because it was whites only. Miserable are these cities now in 2025, and they can't figure it out. And that's why the Lord set up the apostles, all right, and the brothers on down under them to prophesy and show that this all goes back to the Lord. It's not because of inflation. It ain't because of who's in office as far as the presidents. No, it's a judgment from the Heavenly Father, the one they ignorantly call God. Whether they believe it or not is irrelevant. And this is the beauty of it through the Spirit, that the Lord is beginning to touch this place, man. All right. Matter of fact, I'm going to go to 2nd Esdras 15:1, and it reads, "Behold, speak thou in the ears of my people the words of prophecy, which I will put in thy mouth, saith the Lord, and cause them to be written in paper, for they are faithful and true. Fear not the imaginations against thee. Let not the incredulity of them trouble thee that speak against thee. For all the unfaithful shall die in their unfaithfulness." And that's exactly what's happening. All the unfaithful are dying in their unfaithfulness. And it's going to continue, man. Because whether they believe it or not, it's happening. The Wadi How by Shemal Shah, whether they believe it or not, it's all happening according to the Spirit of the Lord. And as we get closer to the end, as the scriptures say, what? It's going to speak and not lie. All right. These Edomites are getting angrier and angrier by the day, by the minute, by the hour. And all those promises that Esau made, all right, that Trump made to them, all right, he's not delivering. Their life is getting worse. You know, they ain't asked him to do tariffs. They thought he was going to make America great again, which means he was going to make their life easier. But you know what? He's doing exactly what the Lord wants him to do. All right. This is Proverbs 21:1. "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will." All right. And that's exactly what the Lord is doing. He put Trump in there, all right, to accomplish his will. All right. Trump ain't on his own program. All right. Matter of fact, let's go here. And I'll end it with this. This is Isaiah chapter 10. And I'm going to get this in the NLT. Verse 7 reads, "But the king of Assyria will not understand that he is my tool. His mind does not work that way. His plan is simply to destroy, to cut down nation after nation." All right. And these Edomites don't understand they were a means to an end. They were the evil. They were the wicked for the day of evil. That's why they were created. And now the Lord is allowing evil to destroy itself. Call Allah Shai. So with that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.